Hello there, this is Richard Hurstwood and this is the introduction to the introduction of iPads in special education. It's 16 minutes long, it's quite long this, so we better get on. Okay, here are the notes from the introduction section to the iPads. If you remember, I started off talking about from Acorns to Apples because there's been a really interesting shift in the way that technology is affecting our schools, especially in special education and pre-5s. Wonder how many people on the course were old enough to to see what this was. What year was this? Well, actually, the picture was slightly false because somebody pointed out that the hard drives didn't come in till later on, but BBC microcomputers, if you remember those going into schools, the year was 1981. That's scary. And it was a little before, actually, but if you were around when they were, you're now 31 years older. Yahoo! I don't remember them. Well, actually, I do, if I'm honest. So, how far have we come since the BBC computers? Well, actually, we've come a long way, but like many things in education, I actually think we've come full circle. We've come right back. The iPad has really given us a very interesting opportunity that we lost when we lost the BBC computers. One of the main things about the old BBCs and Acorns and computers like that they were in the fledgling days, they were in the early days when the hardware was expensive, but the software was designed by enthusiasts. It was designed by people who were really keen on what they were doing. It wasn't designed by big companies. I remember meeting Nick Pronger from Brilliant Computing and lots of other different people who were doing some tremendous software because it was in their heart to do it, and that was fantastic, you know. So everything was designed for the right reason. CEMEX were CEMEX were very different back then because CEMEX were government run, and basically a CEMEX was a place you could go to try technology, to give it a go, and I think there were 4 or 5 around the country. The same for the ACE centres now. Of course, there's still a couple of brilliant ACE centres knocking around now, but ACE centres used to be, again, they were fantastic places to go. They still are, actually, but CEMEX and all of this, they tend to have gone very commercial, and now they're more of a company rather than a service. The NCET, the little bit at the bottom here, you can see the National Council for Educational Technology, chooses Coventry. Ah, how awful. Coventry's brilliant. And they were based there, and they did lots of things to do with technology. And I remember one of the first times I worked with Clive Smith, who, if you remember, assisted us on the iPad course. We actually took a big roadshow around lots of universities across the UK, all funded by the NCET. There were lots of IT people all showing their wares for BBCs and Acorns and things like that. And I was doing multi-sensory, and I'm sure I was treated as the entertainment. But nevertheless, I was explaining about bubble tubes and projectors and fibre optics. And it was fantastic because everything was free. You didn't have to pay for any of this. But what happened was along came the PC. Now, there's no question the PC is a much more powerful machine than the BBC, and to be fair, I think the iPad. But along with the PC came companies who realised that there was profit to be made in these things. Now, that's not a bad thing because Hurstwood Training is a company that needs to make a profit. But what tended to happen was the big guys then began to buy up the little guys, and everything's really started to roll into one. We lost the CEMEX, we lost that independent advice, and suddenly we have, not just expensive machines, but expensive software. We get into site licenses and things like this, and even today, schools are still teaching Microsoft Word and Excel, which I wouldn't criticise. It's very good, it's very professional, but is that what we should be teaching kids in schools, you know? So everything in IT got really expensive. Add to that the idea that we have to put it on an interactive whiteboard in front of a class, and this is getting to cost one whole lot of money. So this IT thing became a big industry, and it still is all over the world, and I'm sure will continue to be, because there's no doubt that iPads don't replace computers. They don't do the same things that computers do. They've created a niche of their own, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. Consequently, because of all the big guys coming in and the expensive software, the little guys did actually disappear, and I tended to find that there were very few sort of programmers who were parents or just enthusiastic. Now, I don't wish to say that programmers are not enthusiastic, because of course they are, but maybe we need some people whose heart is really in it. So the big guys went, which was really quite sad. I was trying to find sad pictures actually to really have a look at this, and those were the only two I could find. Anyway, hang on a minute, where are we now? Along came the iPad. Now, the iPad has not been with us for long, and it's still finding a niche, and there is hope for us, and I'll tell you why. Because it's a totally different media. I remember looking at watching Star Trek, even years ago, even when Captain Kirk was William Shatner. They would have these amazing communication devices, and you looked at that and thought, whoa, we'll never get to this. This is amazing, But of course, here we are, the iPad. It's a tremendous thing, and it is opening up a host of opportunities in both special and mainstream schools. Although, what sort of opportunities? Well, we'll look at that later. Now, one great thing about the iPad is that it is extremely thin. It's really light. It makes it really accessible, and on these series of videos you'll find there's different cases and all sorts of things that we demonstrated on the course. And of course it means that we can make it quite a tough machine, but initially it's very light. Does mean it's slightly flimsy, so we have to be a little careful, but you know what? It makes it really accessible. One of the questions I got on the day was, how do you put it onto a whiteboard? How do you make it project onto my screen? And the answer is, well, yeah, we need for some children and some students, we need it to project onto the screen. But for some, it opens up access. It means that the student can get the screen right in front of them. Over the last few months, I've been working with children who are accessing screens for the first time, because just for a change, we can take the screen right to them immediately. We don't have to get a special bracket to put the screen on so they can touch it. You can hold the damn thing. You can get it right in front of the child, and that's tremendous. Now then, the cost of the thing. Whoa, starting from $399, and probably by the time you're watching this, the iPad 3 will be out, and it may be more expensive, but hang on a minute. When you look at what this thing does, that's very little money. And I have to say that when I'm getting iPads, I tend to not think of it as a computer. I think of it as an access device, not just for communication, but for many things. And even the top price of £700-800 for an iPad is still very comparable to maybe other pieces of IT, information technology, that we're actually buying in schools. So I don't see them as being really, really expensive. And of course, as time goes on, the Android system will develop in education, and we'll have probably some much cheaper options, So the price, I don't think is too bad. This is great. 10-hour battery life is wonderful. Most laptops can't last that long. It means that you can charge it up overnight in the school, and then in the morning start to use it, and you don't have to plug it in all day. You can basically use the thing, and then, at the end of the day, stick it on charge and you're off again. This is the other thing, the cost of software. I've already had a little moan about the cost of software. Well, to be honest, the trouble with software in special ed is that it's a small market. And in a small market, you're not going to move millions of units. So that means that the software has to be quite expensive. Now, here we are, 69p, 149, 199, 249. That's really reasonable money, and a lot of the apps that we're going to use and we used on the course are absolutely free. They cost nothing. This is really not a lot of money to pay at all. And of course, having the addition of, if you've got 30 iPads all connected to the same account, you can run that £2.49 bit of software on all of them with no extra cost. There's no site license to actually have to purchase. So you can get lots of different kinds of software. 140,000 apps is a lot, and it does mean that it's difficult sometimes to find the stuff you're looking for because there is literally so much. But it also means there's a choice. Just this morning, well, before recording this, somebody came up with some questions on the internet. Did I have an idea of any apps for encouraging vocalization? And 5 or 6 came to mind straight away. All of them around 99p. So for £5 or £6, we can try them. And if they don't work, or if just one works, whoa, that's been pretty good value for money. So the price of the apps is really good. And even the most expensive app that I know of that we would use, Proloquo to go, £129.99p. It's got great support. Is it worth it? Well, yeah, compared to other communication devices, sure, it's worth it. There are much cheaper options that we'll look at later we looked at later in the day. But even though we can always criticise Proloquo because it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do the other, even at 130 quid, hey, it's worth a shot, you know, it's worth a go to see if a child or a student can handle the cause and effect, the hand-eye, those kind of things that it takes to run maybe what we could say is a proper communication device. But there is a little point about that I'll talk about later on. So, I have to say a big thank you to Ian Wilson because he's got a great website, www.ipadeducation.co.uk. It's a really great site, and I was going to write loads of stuff about iPads, but I discovered his site and got in touch with Ian and asked if it was okay if I used some of his stuff, and he said, yeah, no problem at all. So the next bit of this is an amalgamation of Ian's stuff and mine as well, because it's so important that we think about this, you know. The iPad itself, people say, is it a small laptop? Is it a big mobile phone? What is it? Well, actually, it's a category of its own. It's not a small laptop. It's not a big mobile phone. It could be both of those things, but really, it is actually a device of its own. The tablets, any tablet, even if it's an Android or a Windows tablet, these are often devices that have opened up a brand new category for it. And the thing about this category is it offers us one-to-one learning, personalised learning. It says there, not 1 to 30 learning. In other words, if we put it on a big screen, that's fine. If we put our computer on a big screen, it's okay. But an iPad right in front of a child means that they've got the one-to-one attention of the iPad. And if we're clever, we work out how to get the one-to-one attention of the iPad, you and the child. So we're getting that triangle of communication, which is so important with iPads. One-to-one with an iPad is fantastic, but remember, the iPad is not a dumping ground like a sensory room where we stick the child and he'll get on with that wonderfully well on his own. Well, there may be opportunities for that at some times in the day, but sometimes the one-to-one means that we're in there with the child. The fact that the iPad has a small screen and it is very handleable does mean that we can create a lovely little personal space for the child, and that can be a massive advantage. The other thing about iPads is it could be the end of networks, you know. You don't have to log in and, oh, the network's down. Oh, this bit of software's not going to run because we haven't got the license right. Well, on an iPad you don't have that. You don't have to have them attached to networks. And, of course, you could have the lesson plans on there for a day, a week, a month, or a term's work. It could be a year's work just stored straight onto the iPad. So that cuts down a lot of cost, and of course it makes it a lot less hassle when you can just pick up your iPad, switch it on, and away it goes. That gives us a reduction in the role of the technician. It means that we don't have to go to the tech guru every time we need something done. Schools need tech gurus. They need people who know about technology, but hang on, this is a bit of technology that we don't need to know how it works. You know, we have lots of evidence of people just being able to pick these up and away you go. Also, getting software on these is really, really simple. It downloads and it installs itself. You don't have to go through hoops, discs, CDs, all these kinds of things. Now, it's not a hassle at all. The other point, of course, is this kind of does away with the idea of ICT suites. Now, don't get me wrong, not a bad thing teaching kids about Excel and Word and things like that, but children don't want to learn about computers. You don't want to learn about computers. What you want to know is what they actually do. We don't really learn best what any computer, any iPad or Android can do unless we actually use it in the setting that we need to use it. An ICT suite teaches kids about computers, not about what they can do. So this means that the iPad can be used anywhere, and as I've already mentioned, the battery is a really great plus point for this thing. You switch it on in the morning and you can switch it on and off again, stick it on charge at 3:30 and it'll be ready for the next day. That gives us contextual learning, so the battery life, the form factor and the apps mean it can be an anywhere, anytime learning device. This thing can be used wherever we want it to be used. The only place I wouldn't use it is in the swimming pool, if I'm honest, but it does mean we can move this thing around, we can take it with us. The other thing is that the world can come to us. The iPad is basically a machine that opens us up to the world. A lot of the apps we can get are from overseas, at last without the hassle of Internet Explorer and these things. We can buy apps from China, we can buy apps from America, we can really look at what everybody else is doing and they can look at what we're doing. So as a communication and an awareness device, not just for news but for different kind of apps, the iPad is fantastic. So, it's a science lab, a literacy tool, a research station, a history archive, a language lab, an art canvas, a music studio, a video editing suite, a games console and a library. It's everything. It's brilliant. Is it perfect? No, of course it isn't. It does have some downsides. The iPad isn't the toughest thing unless you protect it. The iPad isn't, as everybody would think, instantly operational. Not every child automatically works out what it can do. So there is some learning, but in my opinion, it's a lot easier and a lot better than the old PCs. For now anyway, until something else comes out.